while we've heard mission statements as it pertains to business and entrepreneurial ventures, you are keen on teaching that we need to have a personal mission statement for our life. Talk to us about that philosophy.
Absolutely. Look, you mentioned business. There's no business on earth, no organization, no entity, no institution that can exist without a mission statement. And a mission statement is unique, short, and measurable. If someone came to you and said, I'd like you to invest in my company, and you ask them, what's your mission statement? And you say, well, I don't really have one, or it's very long and complex, or I have several options. You laugh them out of your office. You won't, how could you exist without a mission? And yet, when it comes to our personal lives, if you ask somebody, what's your mission in life? Most people don't really have an answer. Some giggle. Some people say to be happy, to make money, to have a healthy family. Those are all wonderful things, but they don't qualify as a mission. A mission means how you use your unique skills in some way to serve, in some way to illuminate and warm the corner of the world in which you are in. And I'm not blaming anyone. It's just that in school and in our homes, we're not really taught to think. We think more like our lives are more driven by survival-centric life instead of mission-centric. The idea that you wake up in the morning, you have a new day, you have new opportunities, some way to spiritualize, some way to transcend your just survival and existential life is something that is critical. I find that if one doesn't have that, often other problems will crop up. And it's probably the most preemptive and preventive medicine you can have is to know that you're driven with a sense of urgency to fulfill a particular calling in life. That's why you find, for example, soldiers in the military, people who are focused and are very clearly know this is what I need to achieve. They have a certain type of crystallized view on life. And it's sorely lacking, especially in our comfortable, in our comfort zones of our comfortable, prosperous and successful lives. I know people have a lot of challenges, but if you were to begin anywhere, find yourself your calling. What is your calling?
So good, so good. You talked about that survival-centric life, and obviously here in the Western world, it's kind of become a theme, especially in the last 5 years. Talk to us about what that looks like. How does one identify whether they're only surviving or if they are, let's say, maybe thriving as it pertains to a mission? What is that? I guess that survival. How do those characteristics show up?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there are a few ways you can easily see it. Look at your average day. What are your goals for today? Most people will say, I go to work, try to do my job successfully, maybe meet some friends, maybe family, maybe personal obligations, go shopping. If your answer is anything like that, it's most likely survival. When I say survival, by the way, does not mean that you can't be successful. You can be surviving and be very wealthy too. But surviving means there's short-term goals. It's more of immediate. You're responding to things. That's yet another thing, being reactive. There's expectations, there are demands on you, whereas we'll call it mission-centric is you're far more proactive. So another way to measure would be, you write down 3 goals that you would like to achieve in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. And again, likely, if you can't answer that, it's more likely that you're not yet in a mission-centric place. Again, this is not saying this as critique. I'm just saying it as a matter of fact and observation. So survival is really responding, reacting, short-term, instant gratification, dealing with immediate issues like putting out a fire, some type of crisis. And mission-centric is going to always be proactive. You plan it out, strategic. Another point is your material life versus your spiritual life. If your material life is driving you, it's going to mostly be very, very about whatever it is that you need right now. You're hungry, you eat a meal. You're thirsty, you drink. You're tired, you go to sleep. You need some exercise, you need to go to a doctor, you need to go shopping. It's very much about those immediate things. A spiritual type of life is one that thinks in terms of, what do I want to accomplish with all of this? Like if someone asks you, what do you do? And you give them their business card, that's usually a sign that you're focusing on what you do, not who you are. If I ask you who you are and you give me your business card, you tell me what you're doing, not who you are. And who you are is like, what are your bigger and longer term plans? So as they say, the question of a wise person is half an answer. If you start asking these questions, you're already beginning the journey.
Mm-hmm. That's such a profound thing. And I think maybe some of the challenges, and for some is because society, especially in our Western world, we're so honed in on what a person does, because we're always looking for the next opportunity. We're always looking for the next connection. So people don't even take the time to think about who I am and what I have to contribute, because it's always about what I do. And if I'm resourceful enough or connected enough or wealthy enough, how do we cut through that I guess that societal pressure and identify this mission and really hone in on it?
Well, I think the way is really to get emancipated. You have to realize that all of us, I include myself, we're all products of you mentioned Western society. Let's talk about the Western world. We're products of media, of marketing, of an education that programs us, that demands things of us, that shapes our minds. So in that sense, what do we value? For many people, you mentioned some of them, I'll mention a few more. Like what considers when you say, what's your value? So many think in terms of productivity, buying power, my looks, my sexuality, the way you measure success is always in terms of what other people think is valuable. But when's the last time you asked yourself this question? Your very existence, is it valuable even if you're in a not productive mode that day, even if you don't have a lot of equity? In other words, the essential value of a human being is not based on your production. It's not based on your projection. It's not based on your successes. It's based on the fact that you exist. The mere fact that you're here. I have a line in my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, which I use very often. Birth is God saying that you matter. The very fact that you exist means you are indispensable. We live in a big world, 8 billion people out there. You're like one grain of sand on a beach. What difference does it really make? But the first place is to find out what you are, that you are valuable, independent of your accomplishments, independent whether you get a compliment or not. Now, obviously, we want our friends and our loved ones and our coworkers and associates to validate us and also nurture us. Of course, our parents nurturing us. But ultimately, it's because you have an essential state of purpose, a certain essential sense of purpose. And that is sorely lacking today, very deeply lacking. I mean, the issues of low self-esteem, feeling insecure, the fears of our lives. I mean, almost everything that people go through, which is why they either self-medicate or therapy or finding some relief from the existential loneliness of life, would be resolved if you really felt inside out that you have something unique to contribute, that only you can contribute.
So good. You talk about that existential loneliness of life, which leads me to something I definitely want to dig into with you, and that is this emotion of anxiety, fear, and depression, which so many are experiencing, and some don't even know. They don't even know how to identify it, but they're seeing the results of it. Talk to us about those types of emotions and how they show up in our lives and how they could possibly serve us in this higher calling.
Well, let's break that into two parts. I want to just continuing my last point. So the fact is we are constantly being inundated. I think there's statistics that show by the time you're age 20 in the Western world, you've been exposed to over 1 million advertisements, whether they're online or in billboards or on television or radio or wherever, walking down the street. So we are inundated by others wanting something from us. Buy this product and you look good. Travel to this place and you feel good. That you're not complete until you purchase something. Very commoditized and very, let's put it this way, it's a marketing-oriented life. And how could that not lead to anxiety at some point? Because you can't have it all. And you feel my friends have more than I do. They're driving a better car, smoking a better cigar, traveling more. So there becomes this like almost competitiveness of trying to achieve something that you can never fully be complete with. And the hungrier you get, the more you feed yourself, the hungrier you get. And it's a constant, so we say, it's a constant inundation, as I mentioned, that creates a hunger that never goes away. Whereas the way to resolve anxiety is to find something that really is meaningful to you. You find someone you love. You volunteer for a project that is helping, let's say, special children. What happens when those things come your way? You feel you don't have to buy something, or you don't have to do something to satisfy someone else. There's some type of inner satisfaction. Now, unfortunately, when things are going well in a person's life, we don't have a wake-up call. Comfort zones create apathy. And apathy creates stagnation. That's how it is. So what usually wakes people up? Some form of discomfort, some form of pain, a loss, a death, being fired from a job, a divorce, personal challenges, that usually shakes you up and that causes movement. Now, I'm not wishing that upon anyone, but that's the nature of things. So in that sense, your anxiety, as well as your lack of something, can actually be a catalyst. A catalyst. You know, I don't want to sound morbid, but a dead person is not anxious. It's only a sign of life that you're anxious. So anxiety, if you allow it to be channeled, not to become something that is overwhelming, then anxiety could actually stimulate and motivate you to do something about it. I write in some of my articles, I write that anxiety is your soul crying out. It's hungry. It wants something. It's lacking something. If you feel you're not lacking anything, you're usually not going to search. So you could turn around some of those more, what we would like to feel negative experiences that actually can become springboards for tremendous growth. What do they say? It's like you're like a tea bag. You don't know how strong you are until you're put into hot water. So the hot water tends to bring out deeper strengths. But it's very important to have friends and a support system, because sometimes it's very difficult to do this on your own. Just throwing that into the equation here.
So true. Anxiety is something that will, and I'm paraphrasing, will lead you to a lacking of your soul. So are there a series of questions that people should be asking when they're in this anxious moment, knowing what this philosophy that you're speaking? How do they find that moment or that thing in their soul and to identify it? What's the process for that?
Yeah, well, I want us to distinguish between clinical anxiety. Sometimes somebody may need medication, they may need a doctor, or they may need a therapist to help lower the temperature, so to speak. But the general process beyond that is not allowing yourself to be trapped by the tentacles of anxiety, because anxiety can easily lead to depression, and then you get yourself in a place where you don't want to leave your home, you just stay in bed, you're not motivated. So it's critical, that's why I mentioned to have friends, to have someone and things you can do that help pull you out of that place. So it's really not allowing the anxiety to control your life, but rather to fuel and drive you somewhere. Unfortunately, anxiety can lead you to more anxiety. It becomes a vicious cycle. But in the positive, when you see people use anxiety for the positive, what they do is they take their sadness or their loss or their grief or whatever that makes them anxious and some way harness it into some type of positive growth. I'll just give a simple example. Look how many beautiful organizations have been built and established by a cancer patient. Who is it? Michael Fox had Parkinson's. So what did he do? He created a whole Parkinson's Institute. He took his so-called setbacks and turn them into some positive force in life. So it's not allowing the negative to become the end of the story, using it as a springboard, as a catalyst to drive some positive, anything that you can do that's positive. You'll find that many people who have invented great technologies, if you really study their lives, you'll find a lot of pain and anxiety. I mean, you talk about Steve Jobs, you talk about others who had very difficult childhoods, and they turned it into something of growth. Now, again, I'm not wishing it upon anyone, but if you're going through anything of that nature, know that it's tremendous anxiety, is tremendous energy. The problem is it's negative energy. It implodes, and you want to use it and channel it into and harness it into some positive effort.
How much of our, I guess, spiritual development is dependent upon that process?
Look, I mentioned earlier that comfort zones are not very good for growth. You know, you see in life, for example, how does a seed become a tree? It needs to deteriorate and rot. It has to change form. In other words, every metamorphosis in life, growth, is going to come through some discomfort. The discomfort of adolescence, the discomfort of pain, of birth pains in order to give birth to a beautiful child. Creativity is often a child of frustration. And the more the creativity, the more the frustration precedes it. So it's understanding that comfort zones are not really, as I said, conducive for growth. So there's an expression, the mystics like to put it this way, that anything to really get anywhere great, you need to go through a vacuum, a void. So there's a state of being. That state of being has to go through some type of like shedding a layer of skin in order to assume a new layer of skin. And it's the discomfort that we don't like, and no one does. But it's a necessary, the egg has to crack for the chick to emerge. And I'm using a lot of metaphors and examples, but it's everywhere in life. And unfortunately, when you live in a very comfortable life and you don't have to fight for your values and fight for your freedoms, it's easy to become a couch potato and just live vicariously through other people's challenges, through soap operas, through sports, and so on. And so it's critical to see yourself and say, do you want to stay in that comfort zone? Or do you need a kick in the butt, so to speak, to get yourself out of it? And sometimes you need to invite that into your life.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so good. How would an individual who's maybe, I guess, a bystander in this situation, so they're not dealing with the depression or anxiety, but they have a loved one who is there something they can do or a role they can play to help support? Obviously, that person has to make the decision, but how can we as the community support them in that?
Yeah. Well, if you have a friend or family member or part of your community, I mean, don't underestimate, number one, caring about them, just showing care, even a phone call or seeing them. There's something that we give each other when we comfort each other. People don't realize the strength of that because it somewhat builds confidence. It builds. I look at people, for example, God forbid, someone's lying in a hospital and they have no visitors and no guests and no gifts. And the same person lying right across them, but has many visitors and guests. There's no question our immune system gets stronger with the support of others. It gives you the will to fight and it strengthens you. So number one is simply be there for someone else. Secondly, I would say try to find a hobby that they like. Some people who may be depressed or down like music. They like writing. They like taking a walk in nature and encourage them, maybe go for a walk with them. Because one of the ways to counter the negative is not just to fight darkness, is to bring light into the picture. And one of the ways is to bring something that you're good at. I always ask people who are down, I say, is there something you really like? So I remember one person telling me, yes, I used to love to go out into the forest and look at trees and see what age they were. So I said, why don't you do that? Oh, that's a good idea, but I'm too down. So I suggested that they find a friend and someone went with them. You know, some people like sports. Maybe it's good to go play tennis with someone, go for a run. But again, doing it yourself is difficult because, as they say, the expression is when a person is trapped in the pit, it's very hard to pull yourself out of it. You need someone to throw you a life raft. So finding good support system is very vital. And those that are of us that can be that support to constantly encourage. Now, you don't want to obviously force anyone to do anything. So if someone's not in the mood, they may not want to go to a party or go elsewhere. So you find some ways. I mean, you don't give up. You always look for something that will give them a smile on their face. And remember, you don't have to win the whole war. You need to just small steps. If you can get someone who's depressed to feel one thing they did that day made them feel better and they went to sleep a little happier, you're already going in the right direction. It's not all or nothing. And these are some thoughts and suggestions that each of us can do to help others in that space.
That's so good. You have a presentation or teaching that you do that's entitled Unclutter Your Soul, Things to Get Out of Your Life. Let's talk about the cluttered soul. And obviously, anxiety, depression, those things may be results of it. But many of us are probably cluttered in our soul and don't know it. Talk about this teaching and what this cluttered soul is.
Well, this goes down to, again, you're going to require self-awareness. If you can make a list of everything you did today, at the end of the day, or yesterday, you're going to find the clutter very quickly because you'll start seeing so many details that seem disjointed and disconnected. And so many things that you're doing that are like, it's just like what clutters. You walk into a room and everything is everywhere. So I think awareness is number one. Awareness of what are the necessities that you must do and what are the optional things and what are the things that are just nonsense that just waste your time. If you're ready to see that and look at that, that's the first way to unclutter. It's like anything in life, it's about prioritizing. And prioritizing means what are the single most important things? I mean, I see parents, for example, when their children come over crying for something, the parents will say, stop crying, go play a video game. And the parent is so distracted that they don't realize maybe your child is the single most important thing for you. And children growing up saying my parents were just not there. They were busy with something. That's just an example that the parent has too much clutter in their life and they're not prioritizing properly. It's, again, we spoke before, you can be addicted to the means and forget the end. Like many parents will say, well, I'm busy working hard to give my children security. But the fact is your children right now are not feeling secure. So it's like somewhat ironic. I'm just using that example as an example. And this goes across the board. I mean, it's all about priorities. Today, people have their smartphones, right? The smartphone. How often does the smartphone distract you from the things that are important? I remember riding in a car with a friend I hadn't seen in school. We were high school friends. I hadn't seen him in a while. And we were going somewhere. We're going to a wedding together. And I keep trying to get his attention to try to have a nice conversation. But he's busy texting. And whatever I did, I couldn't get his attention. You know what I did? I texted him. Even though he was sitting right near me. And he looks at the text, then he looks at me, and he's thinking, did you just text me? Or is this like a text from a few weeks ago? I said, no, I texted you. He said, why are you texting me? You're sitting right near me. I said, because I can't get your damn attention. And he said, okay, wait online. I have a lot of other people coming first. That's an example of distortions that happen that we are not, this is called clutter. It's about a lot of clutter. The way to unclutter is you have to prioritize. What are the single most important things that are literally non-optional? Necessities. You'll see people try doing that. They always find themselves frustrated because they start saying, what is most important to me? Is it my loved one? Is it my health? What is it? And you'll usually discover the clutter quite quickly. Another thing you got to keep in mind, when you have a cluttered life, you don't notice it. It's like a person who lives in a mess. They don't notice it till someone comes into your room and says, what a mess. And they don't even realize. They say, it's not a mess. Everything seems to, no, you've gotten so used to it that you don't even realize that you have so much turbulence. And finally, I would say create space. Sometimes just slow down and shut down all the extracurricular sounds and sights and just be alone with yourself. There's so much noise going on. And I don't mean noise always physical noise. It's all kinds of noise, distractions and so on. I mentioned technology. Technology is supposed to free us, but often it enslaves us. All that creates tremendous amount of clutter. How many photos and how many texts do you have on your phone right now? I don't mean you. I mean, I'm saying this to your audience, that is just all over the place, and nothing is concluded. So the joke they say, that if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, what is an empty desk a sign of?
Wow.
But you know what? An empty desk sometimes means you're focusing on one thing at a time.
Yeah, in reference to the desk, I'm just thinking, because I did this recently, where I just said, I looked around space in my home and I said, I got to get rid of some stuff. And some stuff I thought was useful or I might need in the future. And I was like, I just want some clear, like you said, space, creating space. And after getting rid of and throwing away some stuff, it was just a joy to walk into the space and just see space, open area where it's not something here, something there, a bunch of stuff stacked there. So I think, and I wonder if you agree, does even creating an environment physically help us declutter mentally or psychologically?
I think so. Yes, physical space is very important. When you're sitting in a room where everything is all over the place, it's very disturbing and disconcerting. So I think physical space, but it's more than just physical. It's also mental space and emotional space. Again, because we live in a world, there's something to be said. You ever go off to nature where you can't use your cell phone and there are no outside distractions. There's no internet, there's no TV, and there's no news and media and so on. There's something very calming and peaceful. But it's also very disturbing for many because we're not used to it. When you get addicted to toxins, you want toxic air all the time. You want this. Some people can't deal with that calm. Some are afraid of it. I was recently counseling a couple. I was suggesting that one night a week, instead of going out to dinner or to a show, they should just spend time for an hour with each other. They were terrified of the prospect because they said, what are we going to talk about? So I said, two people love each other, married to each other. You can't find something to talk about. So they had all these crutches and all these outside things that they were relying on to keep them stimulated. And that's unfortunate. Today we have all those options. That type of the simple life, as they call it, the simplistic life, is very rare. I am not suggesting anyone should just drop everything because it's not easy to make that change, but you need to have one day a week or 1 hour a day to create that type of empty space. What I often suggest that before you go to sleep, instead of having the TV on or a newspaper on your nose or your phone, just to say a prayer or read something spiritual, something calm, listen to some nice, gentle music. Just get yourself out of the clutter we talk about, out of the turbulence of the day into a calmer place. Guaranteed your sleep will be calmer. And then when you wake up, I would suggest people should wake up with a feeling of gratitude, short one-line chant or prayer or meditation called Modani. It means, thank you for returning my life to me. Thank you for returning my soul to me. So it's a sign of gratitude, a sign of focusing on your soul before you enter the fray of your daily vicissitudes, ups and downs.
Yeah, so good. You mentioned the married couple, and you have a teaching that you do that goes into the spiritual roots of male and female, or men and women, female, I guess I should say feminine and masculine energy. Give us a glimpse into that presentation. What do you unveil in that?
Well, each one of us, male or female, has both masculine and feminine energy. So it's not mutually exclusive. Yes, there could be some people have more strong feminine tendencies, others have masculine, but these are two necessary components in life. And I'll define them in an archetypal way. I don't mean now in any individual, because there's some men that are very feminine. There's some women that are very masculine. So it's more of an archetype. It's more of a disposition. So the difference is the two energies are, one is more intimate internal energy, I call it, and the other is more external expression energy, expressive energy. Just to give a simple example, when you're communicating with someone, you're interacting with them, whatever it may be, that's more of a masculine type of energy. When you're with yourself and thinking, what do I feel? That's more of an intimate internal energy. Now, it's not just extrovert, introvert. It's just really two forms. And we really need both to be complete. A person who's just always interacting, he's always out there, always the social butterfly, and never has some type of intimate internal experience, not complete. And the other way as well. We need both. So even though many people don't identify that necessarily with a woman and a man, but conceptually, the way the mystics put it, it's two forms of energy, and both are extremely necessary. Now, the intimate energy is one that's less appreciated in our world. Today, if you're not a go-getter, you don't fight for it. If you don't do it, if you don't take care of yourself, no one's going to take care of you, is a very masculine way of, let's call it the hunter, the warrior, the aggressive one. And many women feel they have to follow the men in that direction. But there's another part to us, which is not a warrior, which is a very gentle soul, a very gentle, nurturing and nurtured soul that needs love. Love is very different than aggression. So the truth is, in our world, you need both, because we do live in a hostile world. You need to tame the elements and you need to protect yourself. But you cannot become, even if you have to fight some battles, don't become a warrior. There's also that other side of you that's far more soulful. So therefore, I would say something like soul and body, or spiritual and material, both are needed. And one is more masculine in the sense, the ego, the drive. One is more feminine, it's more the internal. And look at love. For men, love is a verb, an action. For women, love is a noun, a state of being. And which one is right? You need both. You need the experience, but you also need the state of being. And man love means I'm making love. And for a woman, love is not just making love, it's being love. It's the state of being of love. And I think in our world, there's a lot more focus on the verb, on the actions. We do this technique, this method. And there's something sometimes just about, forget about method, just be yourself and be there. And like a fish in water, it doesn't need always a particular act or expression. It's sometimes just silence can be just as powerful, if not more powerful than words.
You talked about that verb versus noun for the male and female. And I heard you tell a story about, I guess, a couple where the husband came home and she asked, how was your day? And he said, good, one word answer. But then they go to dinner and he's ranting and raving about everything with their other couple friend. And she's just upset, getting pissed as by the moment. I guess, how do we, make sense of that in our relationships when it comes to he not thinking, my one word answer is, I thought it was good enough. It was a good day. But then going out and saying, having all these details and all of these descriptions as it pertains to what happened and what he's doing. How do we make sense of that? And I guess come to a common ground in romantic relationship?
Well, just to give credit where credit is due, Deborah Tanning, I took that from some of her works about how men and women converse with each other. Very good stuff. So essentially, her point that she makes is that men as children, boys bond through doing things together, sports, games, going places, and women bond as little girls by speaking to each other. So for a man, going out to dinner with his wife, that's enough. He doesn't have to speak. For a woman, speaking is not about, I'm asking you your advice or consulting with you. I just want to speak to you because I love you and I want to share my day with you. And therefore, men and women, they communicate differently. Men's language is more actions, and a woman's language is more connecting and communicating. So I am a firm believer that we need both, and we can learn from each other. Men tend to be more action-based, okay, in that sense. So I don't have to speak. So he tells his wife, my day was good, that's all. And when it comes to his friends, that's where he suddenly comes alive. With his wife, he went out to dinner. He doesn't need to speak. For a woman, speaking is not about, I'm getting your advice. It's, I want to speak with you. Why don't you just tell me about your day? Not because you have to tell it to me or because you want my advice, because you're just sharing. So I think it's really about understanding both things. And again, in this world that we live in, because of its heavy focus on materialistic success and aggression, is like a male-dominated society, and women are unfortunately forced to play by those rules. Some people say if women ran the world, there'd be no wars.
Hmm.
And, I'm not suggesting women are all peaceful and everything is perfect, but it's just a different approach to things. It's a lot more gentleness. Maybe that's why we were created, that women carry a child and a man does not. Because like I remember once a little girl telling her pregnant mother, she says to her mother, "Mommy, what do you have inside you?" So her mother says, "I have a child." She says, "How do you have room inside you for another person?" And I thought about it and I said, men don't even have room for others outside of them, let alone inside. What would a man be like if for 9 months he had to carry another human being and it's not just carrying it in your stomach, it's your whole being, your whole physiological has changed. So you see from that, there's very different ways of experience things. Now, I find many men that are extremely nurturing and very loving and very intimate in that way. But intimacy is an interesting word, because intimacy, I would definitely defer to the feminine form of intimacy to really learn about intimacy. When you talk about intelligence, IQ versus EQ, emotional intelligence versus intellectual intelligence. For men like to play mind games. They play chess, and a woman naturally is often much more, and I say emotional, I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I mean the opposite, actually. She's far more emotionally intelligent, intuitive, and understanding human relations, where a man can get stuck in his head and his emotions are very immature, frankly.
So good. Wow. You mentioned
we're man to man. We're speaking man to man here.
Yeah, exactly.